So let's move on to our next speaker. It is Steve Falvo. Steve has been a member of Story Spinners for about 6 years now. He has published 3 books, including a children's book, which I've read and have purchased a copy of. Very entertaining. And Steve actually works as an employment coach and used to work as a vibration analyst. Which I have no idea. That sounds very intriguing. So I bet he's got a lot of good stories for us, but tonight he's going to talk to us about the brick house. Please help me welcome Steve Falvo.
Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. Comes from Ephesians 5:11. Tonight I'd like to share with you a story that's based on actual events. It's one of the stories in a series of stories about Lost Nations, which is a state game area in southern Michigan. Been working on a book that's a collection of stories tied to Lost Nations. Lost Nations is near Hillsdale, Michigan, and I grew up and spent a lot of my growing up years around there. My best friend and I, when I was in my late teens, started a tradition that we carried on for about 15 years that involved driving over to Lost Nations kind of around midnight, late night drive around Halloween time. And I want to share with you the story of the 4th year that we did that trip. Each year, the trip would kind of build up a little bit bigger and better, and that 4th year, I invited a lot of people to go on the trip, and we started off by coming over to my house, and we had pizza and pop and snacks. No alcohol or drugs were ever a part of any of these trips, by the way. And it was kind of a festive atmosphere. That year, everybody dressed up in costumes when they came over. So my friend Dave had like a shirt that was all ripped and had fake blood on it. I think he had some kind of cleaver kind of through his head, it looked like. And my girlfriend dressed up in some kind of a cat costume with fancy makeup. I dressed as the Invisible Man with like a white tuxedo, but black stocking over my head and gloves on. And other people dressed in various ways. There were 8 of us there. Going through, eating, and then we watched a movie, and there was an air of excitement and anticipation the whole evening. And then we got ready to do the drive to Lost Nations. And we lived in Bryan, Ohio, which was 15 miles south of the Michigan border and about 35 miles away from Lost Nations. So it didn't take a long time to get to Lost Nations typically, but the way we did this, we would drive to the Michigan border. And as soon as we crossed into Michigan, we would divert off of the main roads and head to the back roads. And it was kind of a dark evening, overcast, not a lot of light. And as you're driving down back roads, even roads you've driven down before, they look different at night. Each time you would drive down in the dark, the road would look different. And if there was a curve, you wouldn't necessarily anticipate it, because it would just look a little different each time. And so we went on this drive, probably 20 miles through back roads till we got to Lost Nations. And then we started driving around the dirt roads there, which were like a 3rd or 4th tier dirt road. But really, that wasn't what we were there for. On this 4th trip, annual trip to Lost Nations, on the night drive, we were planning on going to visit this brick house. It was an abandoned brick farmhouse. And we had been in it, my friend Dave and I had been in it during the daylight before, but we wanted to go in it at night. And so we got the cars, we had 2 vehicles in this time, because we had more people than we could fit in one, and we pulled up in front of this house. And it was about a half mile outside of Lost Nations on a deserted dirt road. And we got out of the cars, it's about midnight. The temperature was pretty decent for that time of year, not too cold, a little crisp, but not bad. Overcast when we get out of the car. And as we had gone in 2 cars, kind of the conversation kind of went down a little bit. It wasn't as exciting. But when we got out of the cars, I could see that, I could hear that the conversation was picking up. Everybody was excited. And as I walked around the vehicles to the house side of the vehicles to where everyone else was at, I was kind of surprised that no one had started walking towards the house yet. And that was about the time that the trip started becoming a lot less fun for me, because I realized everybody's waiting for me to lead the way. So I had everybody out there, so I had to start leading the way. Now the house was set back off the road maybe 40 or 50 feet, and it had a driveway that went along the left side of the house, all the way behind the house to some buildings back behind the house. And I started walking along there, and everybody started following me, single file. And we had a few flashlights, not one for everybody, but maybe 3 or 4 amongst us. And we walk all the way back behind the house. Now the front of the house, there was a door there, but it was closed. No windows in it or anything. We never tested that. So we walk around to the back, and there was a wooden porch. So we get around to the back, see the wooden porch. I shine my light through. The back door is open. In fact, there is no door on the back, so we didn't actually break into the house. But I see it looks clear. No people or anything in there. So I step up on the wooden porch and keep walking. Walk through the threshold into the house. And when you first go into the house, it was like a 1.5-story farmhouse. And when you went into that back room, it was kind of a kitchen, dining room type area. And I just stepped in a little ways with the flashlight. Well, during the day when we'd been in there, the ambient light around you, you could see everything. Your peripheral vision would work very well. With the flashlight, you can see wherever you're pointing just fine. That's not a problem. But you can't see off to the side at all. And that was a little disconcerting as we were going in to the house. But we kept walking. And another thing to bear in mind, I get in there a ways and I look over to my left, and I noticed that, and it was like this during the day too, and you probably would question how bright we were at going in this house at all, and especially at night. But the floor had let loose on the left side of the room and dropped down. About 1/3 of the floor had dropped down into the basement. So you could see almost to the floor in the basement there. And we kept walking and walking through. Everybody's following me, single file. Well, I walk over towards the far side of the house. I'm not sure where I was going to go after that, but when I get to the far end, I hear somebody towards the back of the group say, "I heard something." And about 1.5 seconds later, somebody said, "I'm getting out of here." Everybody did an about face, and they start scrambling for the door. But before we can get there, when we had been in there before, there were only 2 or 3 of us. But now there are 8 of us, and there's a lot more weight, and now we're running. And the floor suddenly lets loose and drops down the rest of the way. And it stays up by the wall of the house, but it slides. We slide down. It's like a 45-degree angle, and we all tumble down and bang against a stone wall in the basement. And the flashlights are strewn on the ground, and we're not sure, what's happened exactly, and trying to get our senses about us. And before 30 seconds have probably gone by, there's another loud bang and a crash, and dust and plaster and things are falling on us. And here the ceiling from the second floor had dropped down on the opposite side. And by the time we figured out what was going on, we're kind of in a wedge-shaped triangle, where the wall, the basement wall, is on one side, and on the other sides also, and then the ceiling is coming down to meet the floor that we had been walking on, and we can't get out. And some of the people in our group are starting to panic. They're yelling, "Help, help, help!" And my friend Dave and I, quit yelling. Nobody's going to hear us. There aren't any houses anywhere around. It's after midnight on this deserted road. If a car drove by, they wouldn't hear us anyway. They'd have their windows up. Save your voices. We got to keep our wits about us here to get out of this. So Dave and I are trying to think of ways to get out of that, and we're assessing, people to see, various bumps and bruises and scrapes, but nobody has any broken bones or injuries like that, which is good. We're concerned that maybe the rest of the ceiling's going to fall down on us, and we're probably there about 5 minutes when we hear this loud noise, and it sounds like the front door, the door that we never tried, is opening. And we said, "Hey, somebody out there, we're trapped down here. Can you help us? Can you help us?" And there's nothing, no answer at all. Hey, somebody up there, can you help us?" There's no answer. So this goes on. We don't know what to think of it, but we hear some other little noises kind of around through the house, and we're wondering, is somebody still up there? And after a while, we start to hear this little noise, and we don't know what it is, but it sounds like a rope stretching, like tension on a rope. And pretty soon, we notice the floor on the side by where the door is at is starting to raise a little bit at a time, about an inch at a time. So we can imagine somebody's got some kind of a rope hooked up and some kind of a system, a winch system or something, to lift this floor up. And it keeps going up just an inch at a time, half inch at a time. So it takes quite some time, but eventually it gets up where you can see out of that door, the bottom of the door, for about 2 feet. And then it stops. And we don't hear anything for a little while. And so I decided I'm going to take a look. So Dave kind of helps me. I'm climbing up this floor, and Dave's kind of helped to push me, give me something to brace against so I can peek out. Well, by the time I peek out, I kind of crawl out of the door a little bit, and we found a cement block, and kind of blocked the door, or put that in the door so the ceiling wouldn't fall down there. But I look out, and the overcast skies had cleared somewhat, and some moonlight shining through. And I'm looking down the drive, and I can see 2 guys walking away. And they're walking out towards the road, and there's a vehicle out there. There's a truck, like a flatbed truck, and it has some kind of equipment on the back of it. And the roof of the thing's smashed in. The cab is smashed in quite a bit. And these guys get in the truck and end up driving off. And I didn't think about it that much at the time, but as they got in the vehicle, I didn't hear any doors close. The lights came on. The rear lights were really dim. The front lights were just like glowing, not really shooting out, penetrating through the night. And when they drove off, I didn't hear an engine. I didn't hear any wheels, any tires going on the gravel, and it was really quiet. You should have been able to hear it, you'd have thought. But we were more concerned at that time about getting everybody out. We kind of teamed up. Dave would kind of push him up. I'd kind of pull him out until we got everybody out. And by the time we got out to the cars, we were just relieved that nobody was hurt too bad, and that we were able to put this episode of this late night drive behind us and get home safely from there. Now, about 10 years later, I was invited to an Easter dinner by a friend, and it was kind of unusual, but they happened to live in Michigan. I knew that, but I didn't know where. And it turned out they lived near Lost Nations as well, about 3/4 of a mile around the block from where this brick house had been. And so we went there, a friend and I went there and had the meal, and when that was over, I wanted to talk with the dad, who's a farmer, and ask him if he knew anything about Lost Nations, because I was always trying to gather information about Lost Nations. So I told him about Silas Doty's cave and some of the hikes that I had done, and I told him about this event with the brick house. And he said, "Do you know about the people that lived in the brick house, Steve?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, I wasn't living here at the time, but this is what I heard. There was a husband and wife, and they had a teenage son that was about grown and a younger daughter. And the dad was a farmer, and he had purchased this plow. And the plow was maybe 80 or 100 miles away, quite a ways away, too far to take a tractor to go retrieve it. So they'd taken their old flatbed truck to go get this plow. And the dad had already paid for the plow. He just had to go to this barn, this old barn, and get the plow out. And they backed that truck in there, and they were using a block and tackle system to lift the plow up, and they had it off the ground. And as they were getting it close to getting on the truck, the beam that it was attached to broke. It started to let down, and the plow shifted and trapped them against the side of the truck. and then the beam fell down the rest of the way, smashed on top of the truck and the plow. And by the time anybody got there, they had, neither one survived. And he said, I don't know, what you saw that night, but what you described sounds kind of like his farmer and his son. Now, as I was doing research for the book, I went back to Lost Nations last fall. Hadn't been there for several years and did some hikes to some of the areas that I was interested in. But before I left, I wanted to check out this old brick house that I'd been in to see what the condition was with that. And so I drove past where it was at, but at this point, a year ago, the house was gone. I didn't see any evidence of it from the road. I didn't even see the driveway. I didn't have a lot of time. If I had a little more time, I probably could have gone back in and found the foundation if it was still there, and probably could have figured out where the driveway was. But while the brick house at Lost Nations may be gone, the story about my experience there survives. Thank you.
Great story, Steve. Thanks a lot for sharing that with us.